Hello, welcome back again. This is Module 10B, the second part of Week 10, where we will be talking about importing and outsourcing, looking at actually at a number of things. First thing I'm going to talk about is important to entrepreneurs. It's called a free trade zone or a foreign trade zone. I've seen it go by both names. We'll talk about importing. We'll talk a little bit about exporting and the issues involved there, and outsourcing both services and manufacturing. First thing is a foreign trade zone. Again, I think that is technically the right term. But it's also known as a free trade zone. What is it? Well, it's a location within a host country that is not considered to be part of the host country for trade and tariff purposes. What does that mean? Okay, from a very simple example, it means that here in the United States, for example, in Mount Olive, New Jersey, if you're familiar with New Jersey, there is a foreign trade zone out there. It's on Interstate 80, about an hour west of New York City. Now, what happens is there are typically warehouses, office space, manufacturing space that can be rented in that trade zone. They're supervised and regulated by the U.S. Customs Service, but they're owned by private companies and operated by private companies. What do they do? Well, materials, goods, products, sub-assemblies, whatever you want, that are brought into the zone are considered to have not entered the country. The key there is that the tariffs, the duties, the import duties, are not charged when they're brought in, say, at Port Newark or Port Elizabeth, and transported out to the trade zone. While they're in the foreign trade zone, they are still not in the United States. Therefore, the tariffs don't have to be paid, nor are they subject to the quotas that are involved. Many products have quotas that you can only bring in certain levels in a given period of time, a certain quantity in a certain period of time. You can bring in whatever you want into the foreign trade zone. It's just that you may not be able to ship it out all at one time. And of course, not only are they here in the continental United States, but you'll see that they're in other places as well. Now, again, the idea is that you can add value. You could bring in the assemblies and manufacture them in the trade zone, and you're not going to pay duty on the sub-assemblies. You will only pay duty on the final product, and it may be to your advantage to do that. Sometimes it's not, but it is possible that it could be to your advantage. Of course, you can package it and do things like that within the trade zone. Again, got to do your homework, go investigate it if that's what you're looking to do. But the important thing is that here is a way to mitigate the tariffs, and we'll avoid the quotas. One of the things that we talked about in the last module that we should explore a little bit deeper is, of course, service. Doing service outside the country. Obviously, the internet makes that a whole lot better. We're doing legal briefs, as I said in the prior lecture. Lots of academic work and scientific work is out there. Software development has for many years now been done out there, as has data entry. But we're seeing more high-tech things being done outside of the country. Why would you go out to another country? Better price, better service, research being done in India. Ireland has become a big center for doing computer work and forms and data entry type work. Well, what do you have to find? You've got to get a provider, somebody who can do it, who has the internet capability. Got to get a contract. That can be a problem in some respects, because sometimes the contract laws differ from country to country, and again, you have to be careful. Don't go into this on your own. Find someone who understands the country that you're going to be doing business with, and make sure that you have a set of terms for delivery and payment that are enforceable in the country that you're going to be working in. You have to monitor it. There are some problems in that. If you, in the supplemental reading for this week, you'll see an article called "Just Returning Your Call to the UK," and this is something out of BBC News from a while ago that is kind of takes shots at outsourcing call centers to places like India or Pakistan, and this one focuses on India and the fact of communication problems. Is it getting better? Yes, indeed. The people in these call centers outside the United States are able to understand Americans better. They're being trained, and some of the early frustrations are gone, but it doesn't always necessarily work that way. And again, dealing with service, you have to pay the service provider, and as we're going to see a little bit later when I just talk a little bit about when I talk about importing and when you pay, and again, currency fluctuations, the currency that you're going to pay with and how that fluctuates, again, can make a drastic difference between profit and loss. You have to be aware of a number of things, not only the customs duties, but the Internal Revenue Service, value-added taxes that are prevalent in many foreign countries, and what the legal situation is there, the ability to enforce a contract, to sue somebody or to get sued. Again, legal systems are not global. They are national at best, and that is a problem. Okay, so again, got to do your homework. Take other courses. You may have a problem with personal information about clients. Again, some countries are more concerned than others about release of personal information and how much information you carry about a customer or an individual. And again, that can be an issue to deal with. And lastly, you have to be aware of these kinds of issues. How do you handle it? What do you do about theft of property? Those kinds of things. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here. I apologize for the slight stall. Getting my notes together here. Exporting. A lot of countries don't want U.S. exports. They want to protect their own people, protect their own jobs, just like we see in the news that America wants to protect its jobs. All right, from foreign competition, and there are always opinions and a lot of rhetoric going on in the political arena and in the news. That you have to be careful of. Again, you might be taxed twice. The note at the bottom, don't forget, it's a crime for a U.S. citizen to bribe an official of any country. That happens to be a U.S. law. Whether or not that's enforceable remains to be seen, but nevertheless, be careful. In some countries, the gift giving, as I talked about in the legal piece, gift giving is considered part of the process, and we'll talk more about that in ethics in week 12. But again, be cognizant, be aware of the cultural differences and business practice differences of the country, and if possible, have a local agent, have somebody who is a national of that country involved in the situation. What kind of products are out there? Agricultural, of course. Non-agricultural would include things like we export a lot of movies, a lot of music, a lot of software. We export aircraft. Okay. Boeing, for example, does a lot of exporting. And the cost is driven by currency, taxation, this protectionism that we talked about a little earlier. Again, you may have to alter the product form or the product function. Again, I point you back to the read for this week of altering products to fit different kinds of markets within the world. You have to be careful. You should look at a niche product. Again, point you back to that article. There are controls. There are certain things that are of strategic value, defense and weapons arena, that you cannot send out. Certain types of electronics, certain technologies cannot be exported. That's a problem. You have to deal with a number of government bureaucracies as to handling, getting the permission, the license is what it's called, the license to do this, send this stuff out of the country. And one comment up there under restrictions, dual use items. If you don't know what that is, basically what a dual use item is something that has commercial use but could be modified for military purposes. And obviously, certain electronics, certain chemicals in that fall into that category, and again come under a great deal of scrutiny. Again, I sound like a broken record here, but do your homework. You have to find out a lot about the business in order to do it. With a specialized or niche product, yeah, something that's not going to get a whole lot of attention, selling it on the internet. You know, make sure you can export the product that you want to sell. And if you're a native of that the country, the target country that you're going to, or at least familiar with the country, you have a leg up. You have an advantage. If you don't have that, get some kind of agent, some kind of marketing company, some partner in that country to help to make you successful, because you have to figure out what are comparable products selling for in that country. What your competition here is in the United States is not relevant. You have to look at again, almost the 5 factors. What are the substitutes out there in that country? You have to do your market research. It's maybe a whole different ball game out there. And if you have specialized products, you could license it out there to a local representative. Make sure that you can trust them, and just be careful. Again, the local culture determines success or failure, not whether it was successful in the United States. Lots of things. I believe I mentioned in the marketing about Chevy with its Nova when it tried to sell it in South America. It wasn't a good name. Nova means no go. Had to change the name. Even in Canada, General Motors products traditionally have been sold with different names. Again, because the names within the United States didn't touch a responsive chord with the Canadians, particularly the French Canadians, and General Motors had to put different tags on them. Manufacturing. Why would you want to manufacture in a foreign country? Cost is the usual answer. Cheap labor. But be careful. It's a double-edged sword. There are things like human rights issues. Even if you don't own the factory, you could get involved, like Nike did and Martha Stewart did at one time with sweatshop products, violations of human rights. Again, you have to be very careful as to how you proceed here. There are ways of minimizing the risk. You can just do a direct import. Don't get involved with the manufacturing. Just buy it from somebody and import it. Team up with a company that manufactures, that has a venture, has a presence here that you can deal with in the United States, and they bring it in and you buy it from them. Talk about joint ventures next week, again in a little more depth, but that's a possibility. Maybe there's the opposite side of a foreign manufacturer that has offices and dealings here. You may have buy from a U.S. company that has a foreign factory. Sometimes there's a trade-off. What you may want to do is either, instead of manufacturing overseas, you may buy just sub-assemblies and bring them and finish them in a free trade zone. In the read for this week, I believe the last piece was a one-page article about Mexico and the efforts to kind of get some synergy going at the border, and some entrepreneurial efforts where traditionally, for many years, for at least the last 10 or 15 years, things have been made, sub-assemblies have been made in the United States, transferred across the border to Mexico, where there was a lot of final assembly, labor-intensive work, and then brought back into the United States. And that works very simply. And the mechanisms have been set up to allow that to happen without paying tariffs and custom duties and those kinds of things. So that too is an important issue. So there may be a trade-off bringing some, the stuff into a foreign trade zone. Let me go back for a second. Pick up one other point. One of the reasons that you may want to manufacture is strictly quality, not only cost or let's say value, all right? Quality at a reasonable price. Example, all right? A friend, business associate of mine, owns a company, and I may have mentioned this in a prior lecture, I honestly don't remember, but the company's name is Deluxe Innovations. It consists of just a little factory condo unit in Whippany, New Jersey, and he makes model trains for hobbyists, model railroaders, like me. All of it is produced in China. What he does is get the drawings, get the specifications, colors, how the cars were marked, what their paint schemes were, and labels for these railroads, typically railroads that are long since out of business and exist only in model form. And he has this stuff, he ships CAD drawings to China. They will typically produce a small run of samples, prototypes, check the color and quality of lettering and so forth back to him, and then he has a production run made and receives them back in New Jersey eventually, and sells them not only in the United States but globally via the internet and some train store type dealers. There are people outside the country who model U.S. railroads. Again, the quality, the value, the quality at a price is just superb, and giving China its due. The stuff that has been coming out of China has been, particularly in that kind of arena, the model and collectibles arena has just been incredible. Okay, mentioned earlier during this week, during these two lectures, that when you pay makes a whole lot of difference. Currency. Okay, here the example is an Indian rupee. It fluctuates. Currencies fluctuate all the time, and obviously it's to your advantage to get the best trade, to the most rupees, the most yen, the most euros for the dollar, so that your profits can make a difference. It could be the difference between profit and loss for your business. Again, not for the faint of heart. It takes a lot of attention. Okay, what's the importing process? Very simply, you negotiate the bottom three items. Let's take an example. Stegman slippers. You may have heard of them, may have seen them, may wear them. 50 euros per pair. Free on board, FOB, means you take it in Frankfurt, Germany, and you bear the responsibility, the risk of loss for the shipment. You pay for the shipping yourself, that kind of thing. It's yours as of when it's put into the container in Frankfurt. And we're dealing with cash against documents. Talked about that before. Money doesn't change hands on the dock. It's when you get it, the shipper who's acting as an intermediary, or the freight forwarder who's acting as an intermediary, is told to release the money upon payment. So it's a rather formal process. Okay. 50 euros. How much is that in dollars? Answer, I don't know. Depends upon what the rate is at this point in time. Okay? Maybe a euro may be worth $1. It may be worth less than $1 or more than $1. Again, significant. I mentioned free on board. You have to add the shipping. You have to add the insurance. We've also got custom duties. You saw this slide before. Customs and Border Protection. They have their own website. You can check it out. They collect the duties. There's a thing called a harmonized system of tariffs. And in a moment I'll show you an example of that. But it is set up, as you can see, it's over 3,000 pages, and it's set up by type of product, what it's valued, country of origin, different kinds of rates, whether you're a favored country or not a favored country. And again, that can change very quickly because of political situations. Here's an example. Footwear. Under other, house slippers. Different kinds, what the tariff is. As you can see, if it's coming from certain places, there is none. If it's a general tariff, it's 12.5%. You can see there are sanctions against and heavy duties coming from certain sources. In the import, as I mentioned earlier, again, just reiterating, you have to deal with quotas. The quantity per unit time. And it may, if you exceed that, you may have to pay a higher tariff, or you may be completely banned from shipping any more in once you hit the quota, for that year. There's also a restriction on certain goods, as we talked about before. Things that are not allowed to be imported or exported. But in this context, we're talking about imports. Certain imports are banned. Cuban cigars, all right, was an example. Well, how do you minimize your risk in this kind of arena? Negotiate a price in dollars. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Hedge, well, that's another topic that's beyond the scope of this course. You can play the money market and put the money into a international money market. And I know very little about this topic, about the hedge topic, but there are ways of minimizing your risk so that if the dollar goes down, you're still protected. In other words, for example, you would buy euros with your dollars now and have the euros sitting in your pocket. And of course, if you negotiated a price in euros, you're okay. Somebody else is going to take the loss. Again, hire a freight forwarder to cover shipping, or have the vendor have responsibility. Insure it, pay the shipping costs, and things like that. Many vendors don't want to do that. Again, have to do your homework with customs. And again, a very viable alternative is a foreign trade zone, an FTZ. You saw these charts in week 4. Okay, outsourcing. I mentioned benchmarking and core competencies. Not going to go back through that. If somehow you missed that lecture, go back to week 4 and take a look at it. Same way here. We talked about this. But again, you've got issues to deal with. What you want to do is to focus on your core competencies. This example that I mentioned a few moments ago about the model trains, it might be impossible to find the workers with the skill sets to do this very, very fine, detailed work. Americans may not have that. The average American might not have that skill set. The person, the guy or the gal working on the assembly line at General Motors, really isn't the person to go and try to, if they get laid off, to give them a job assembling these very, very delicate collectibles and painting these very delicate pieces of stuff, plastic, ceramic, whatever. It'd probably drive them crazy very quickly, and secondly, they just don't have the manual dexterity to do it. So you have to go where things get done the best way. Again, I point you to a couple of supplemental articles that are there for this week. One on outsourcing in general, and I think it's an interesting article that talks about the modular corporation and outsourcing, and has a great deal to do with how and why you should go offshore. One of the pieces is how to do it right. If you're going to go offshore, do it properly. The other article that I did not mention earlier has to deal with importing, and you'll see Importer's Nightmare. Again, we talked about mitigating risk. Here's some issues. This article from Business Week points out some real problems in dealing with importing. Again, something you have to do and do well. If you want to outsource part of your business, there are different ways of doing it. Here's some examples. We'll talk more about that next week, particularly joint ventures and how they can apply. Again, you saw this slide before. Be careful. Don't outsource too much. Don't become too specialized. Again, you saw this was in week 4. Stay with your core competencies, but stay broad enough to be adaptable. Strategic alliances that are on the 2 slides back there. Again, strategic alliances are not formal arrangements. They are agreements between 2 companies, perhaps competitors, perhaps complementary. You help me, I'll help you. In a small business environment, it's things like sharing resources, cross referrals. You send people to me, and if somebody's looking for something that you do, I'll refer them to you because, we're friends and doing business together. And again, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can be a subcontractor. You can be the general contractor. Whatever you feel you can handle. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Another one-liner that one of my bosses used to use all the time was, don't overdrive your headlights. Don't overdrive your headlights. Don't be going so fast that you can't see the road ahead of you. Makes sense. Makes sense. Sometimes you have to step back and take it a little slower. Okay, finishing up in summary, importing, foreign products are very attractive in the United States. Big market. There are obstacles, but they're pretty well known and they are manageable. Make sure, again, that you understand enough about the country that you're dealing with, enough about the products, enough about the processes to do it. And do a lot more study and a lot more research if you're going to go into that arena. Services, again, the same kinds of reasons. Know what's going on. Manufacturing, labor costs are attractive. Not always manageable, some of these obstacles. The culture, the sweatshop, the child labor, the human rights issues, even just the political climate of who's in charge of a given country and what their posture is with the United States can be an issue. A little bit riskier. Again, exporting, attractive, may or may not be manageable. Got to watch out for the product clones. Send a product over there, send a movie over there, send a CD or DVD. Before you know it, somebody may be making thousands or millions of bogus copies of this same thing. So you have to be a little careful. Here are some other resources. Again, within the scope of this course, we could only just briefly touch on international business, which is definitely a course by itself. But we can just give an overview of how it applies to the entrepreneur. Next week, week 11, we're going to look at expanding and growing the business, things like joint ventures, acquisitions, issues like that, and just growing the business itself, taking it to the next level. We're also going to cover the area of franchising, of either buying a franchise, such as a McDonald's or something like that, or Dunkin' Donuts, or taking your own business and making it into a franchise, which people have done, obviously. And that's a different angle on it. Again, be sure to read the supplemental readings for this week and look at the materials and read the materials not only in the text, but in the read for next week. Okay? Look forward to you joining me then.